Okay, so we we are in a series about finances, and I want to get to the end of it. So yeah, hopefully we can do that. So today's part 9, and today what I want to talk about is containing our blessings, and it will be 2 parts because I couldn't quite get everything into today, but that's what we'll be looking at. So and that comes from Malachi 3:10. We looked at it already, but we see in Malachi 3:10 where God talks about pouring out a blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it. Not room enough to receive it. So if there is no room enough to receive it, then we cannot contain it. In other words, it is more than we can handle. So in those days, we know that this verse implies like a harvest of some sort. That's what the blessing in those days was. It certainly is not talking about literal gold or silver falling from the sky. Although with God everything is possible. But I'll pour out for you such a blessing. It's not saying I'll pour out for you such a pile of gold in your garden that you won't be able to contain it. So that's not what it's saying. It's not talking about any literal currency. So if it's not talking about currency, whether gold or silver or paper money or whatever, then it can only be talking about some kind of a harvest, like fruit, veg, from your land, and those days, or maybe animals. So if for people that were shepherds, you'd have sheep, goats, and things like that. But today, what about today? We still have farmers today, and some countries there are more farmers than in others. So to them that may still apply, this particular thing. But what about us? We're not farmers. How about us, people who live, and cities, work in offices, factories, and all, businesses and things like that? What about us? So this is one thing I wanted to look at today. But first, as I was preparing this talk, I felt impressed to mention an important thing before we move on and talk about it. And that is the utmost importance of walking in love. Walking in love. We can look at all this, finances and blessing and all that kind of stuff. But if we don't walk in love, we have got a big, big problem. So like the Apostle Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 13, if we do not walk in love, we're nothing. Nothing. So none of this will help us much if we do not walk in love. And what does walking in love look like? One example is in Matthew 22, and we know these verses, Matthew 22, 37 to 39. Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind." That is the whole of you. You shall love the Lord your God. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, it's so important to walk in love. First, of course, loving God. This is number one. God is on the first place. With all our heart, soul, mind, and body. We love God first. Before we talk about money, before we talk about, blessing God and all of that, we must talk about this. Then, very importantly, loving ourselves, and then loving the people around us as we love ourselves. Why did I add loving ourselves? Because it says love God and love your neighbor. But it says loving your neighbor as yourself, you see? So it implies that you love yourself, and then as you love yourself, you love your neighbor. Loving the people around ourselves as we love ourselves. If we do not love ourselves, how are we going to love the people around us? Jesus said, love them as you love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, and there's loads of people that hate themselves, don't like themselves, have issue with themselves, how are we then going to love the people around us as ourselves? Not loving ourselves is a big issue we have. And I know that there's verses in the Bible, and we need to understand what I mean by this, because in some places in the Bible, they are lovers of themselves. And that is when you look only for your interests and nothing else. But loving yourself in the context that I'm talking today is different, and I'll explain. Thinking and talking of ourselves as not smart enough, not tall enough, not skinny enough, not beautiful enough, not clever enough, and all of these things means that we don't like ourselves, because in some way we find fault with ourselves. You cannot satisfy the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself properly. You can't do it until you love yourself and you thank God for the way he made you, for your looks, for your brain, for your abilities, for your talents, and so on. This is very important to love ourselves, because we can only love the person next to us as we love ourselves. So walking in love is very important. And I felt impressed to stress it today, because it will be a hindrance for us as we try to receive and contain our blessings that come from God. So we can pray and ask the Holy Spirit to teach us how to love God, how to love ourselves, and then with that love, how to then pass it on to our neighbors and love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Sometimes if we don't take care of ourselves, you feed your body, you clothe your body. That's how you kind of love yourself. And then in that same way, you love your neighbor. If they need clothes, if they need feeding, if they need help, then you do that through that love that you have towards them. So we are called to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Question is, do we really love ourselves? Or as some people, they hate themselves for whatever reason, and there's lots of other reasons. But there's something called, as I was preparing for this message, I watched something which made an impression for me. And it's to do with this whole loving our neighbors, loving the people around us. There is something called the crab mentality. And you might have seen that, but that was observed when 10 crabs were put in a bucket type container. Now, each crab on its own was able to get out of that container. They were able to just claw and get out and crawl out of the bucket. But as soon as one crab would start to do that, would start to climb out, the rest of the crabs would grab hold of it and pull it back. Now, if that crab would keep on trying to get out, then the rest of the crabs would start pulling it apart, would start damaging it. They could even kill that crab who was trying to get out. Now, all of them can get out. But if one of them tried, the rest of them would pull it back. So what is this mentality? It's the mentality of if I cannot have it, then you cannot have it either. That's the crab mentality. Truly loving people around us is the opposite of that, of the crab mentality. When we love people around us, we say, if I can't have it, I will try hard to make sure that you have it. If I can achieve it, if I cannot achieve it, I will try and help you to achieve it. You see, rather than pulling each other down, we push each other up. So that's what is investing in people. Investing in people around us brings God's blessing. And it's the opposite of the crab mentality. And also that displays that love for our neighbors when we help them like that. So I heard once in a dream, my own dream, a phrase: callousness makes the angel of the Lord disappear. That's the phrase that I heard in my dream. Callousness makes the angel of the Lord disappear. In other words, go. Not. So I didn't know what the word callousness meant. So I had to, when I woke up, I went and checked it out to see what the meaning of that word is. And really what it means is when you look only for your own interests, callousness. When you care only about yourself, your own interests, and not about anybody else. So callousness makes you almost like a stench into the nostrils of God. It repeals that angel that God sends to, to bless and help and whatever. So when we think only of ourselves, it repels God and his help. So walking in love towards God, towards ourselves, and then towards our neighbors, as we do towards ourselves, will attract God's blessing and his angels and all of that, heaven. It attracts heaven when we love the people around, love God, love ourselves, and love the people around us, serve them and pull them out. So now let's turn back and look at the issue, that the subject of tonight, of containing the blessing from God. Because as I was preparing, really I wanted to talk about that, but then I had this whole thing about love and how that can be a hindrance. Because if that's a hindrance, then we can talk about, containing the blessing all day long, and it's not going to do us a lot of good. So we've already established that the blessing of God is pouring, is not exactly cash. Sometimes it can be, like for Peter, he was in full-time ministry. He needed to pay some tax. So if for him to pay that tax, he had two choices. Does he leave the ministry and go and catch fish and make the money, or does God provide it straight to him? So God works in different ways. But in most cases, what does it look like? So that's what we want to look at. So now, for some people, it may be a promotion at work. So we're talking about the blessing, God pouring out a blessing that you won't be able to contain, or in some translation, there won't be room enough to receive it, or until there's no room enough to receive it. So it may be a promotion at work. It may be a business idea. God, you're praying and saying, Lord, maybe I've got debts. Maybe I need to, I want to buy a house. I want to buy, I don't know, I want. And God could say, okay, here's a business idea. That could be a blessing that comes down from God. I've heard, a couple of preachers say there's no money in heaven, but what is in heaven is creativity. There's infinite creativity, ideas, wisdom, concepts. plans and strategies for creating the wealth that we need to, to pay the bills and whatever. So, it could be anything. It could be an idea to buy and sell something, like a small business on eBay or whatever. So it could be anything. If you have a business already, it could be adding a new service to that business, like another arm to it. It could be anything, but usually that's how that blessing looks like when God pulls it down. So in most cases, it's something that you have never done before. It would be a stretching thing, a challenge for you, not only to get blessed, but also to get stretched and learn something, become better, you see. So something outside of our comfort zone. So it will definitely take some participation on our behalf. In most cases, it will take some participation on our behalf. So the question for us is, can we contain it? When that comes, can we contain that blessing? Because you see, it is down to our capacity. It says, until you will not be able to contain it. What determines how much can we contain and what we can't contain? It is capacity. And when we talk about capacity, in biblical terms, straight away we think about the barns that they were having. So I'm going to send you such a harvest that your barn is going to be too small. But what about us and in today's world? And what parallel can we draw from that? So what is our capacity? What determines our capacity? And there are two levels: the physical or the natural, and then the second one is the mental or the mindset. And so those are two things that determine the level of our capacity. So when the Lord sends a blessing, how are we going to contain it? What is our capacity? And these two are the two levels at which our capacity is capped. So first, I want to look at the physical or the natural level of our capacity. And today we won't have time to go into the mental or the mindset. So maybe we'll look at that next time, if you're not bored by it or whatever. Hopefully not. So let's say God gives you some revelation. And let's say that revelation, God says, hey, the National Grid, which is a company on the London Stock Exchange, the National Grid shares will double next year. Let's say God gives you that dream or gives you that revelation, and that's a huge blessing. God says, hey, this stock will double. What will you do about it? That's the question. This is a huge blessing. You could double your money within a year. But what would you do? And that's an example. Now, if you are like many who don't know anything about the stock exchange or are afraid of it, then the blessing will just fly past you. You won't take action. You won't do anything. Now, as the physical level or the natural level, you can call it whatever, you do not have the capacity to receive that blessing. You don't have it. You don't have the knowledge. You don't have the experience to receive that blessing. Now, so I'm giving some examples to explain what this physical or natural capacity is for us to receive and contain blessings that God sends. So another example is, let's say you get promoted at work. In your job, you receive a promotion. With every promotion, of course, we know that a greater level of responsibility comes, more pressure, now you have to make some decisions which could have serious ramifications, and sometimes you have to make them on the spot. You don't have time to, go and pray about it, think about it, or whatever. You have to say, boom, this is the way we're going to do. And so there's a greater level of accountability. Now, that is a blessing. You just received a promotion. Amazing, go and party. But what are you going to do? You see, your pay will probably go up by 25%, more money, which is nice, but do you have the capacity to contain that blessing? And that is the question that we're looking at. We'll straight away think, can I do this job? Can I, what does that entail? What's my responsibilities? We'll straight away start asking questions. Do I have what it takes? We will straight away try to find out, can I contain this blessing? When you look at job adverts, you look at what's required, and you are trying to measure it with your capacity to see whether you can contain it, whether you can walk in that level of authority and responsibility. Or do you see yourself as less than that? So, in other words, can I contain this blessing that's just come my way? So that is straight away what was happening in our minds. So now, another example here, which it happens to people, and I think we should look at. What if God gives you a business idea? So you are praying for blessing, you're praying for increase. Maybe you want to buy a house, maybe you want to buy a car, maybe you want to go on a holiday or whatever, and God says, great, I'll bless you. Here's a business idea. Now, what are you going to do? You would need to, if you get a business idea, now you would need to start a company. And everything that entails with that. You'll deal with accountants, with suppliers, with customers, with insurance offices, and all of that comes with starting a company and running a company. What are you going to do? There's the blessing. The first question in our heads might be, whoa, can I do this? There's so much, you see. Again, the question is, do I have the capacity to do this? What is my capacity? Is this a blessing that I can actually contain? And that's what people ask themselves. And sometimes people decide that no, I don't want to, I can't deal with this. I haven't got a clue, company's house and all of that, So what they end up doing is giving the idea to somebody else who has the capacity, and then they just keep a part of it, you see. So they were unable to contain the whole blessing to themselves. So our capacity to contain the blessing is important. And God will not give us more than our capacity. This story demonstrates a whole lot better from the Bible the issue of capacity and how important is our capacity to contain a blessing. And so 2 Kings 4 verses 1 to 6. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord. So she's putting a case here for her husband, that he was your servant, he served God, He feared God, but now he's dead. And the creditor, so he died whilst being in debt, so he left his family in debt. And the creditor is coming to take away 2 sons to be his slaves. So this lady had 2 sons. So Elisha, the prophet, said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" And she said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil." A jar of oil, that's all she had. Then he said, "Go borrow vessels from everywhere. Go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, not just a few neighbors, not just the neighbors near to you, from all your neighbors. Empty vessels. Do not gather just a few." So he is saying the same thing in so many different ways. He's basically saying, get as many vessels, as many jars as possible. But he's saying in different ways to give her ideas. Go to your neighbors, go to, all these, gather not a few, many, whatever. "And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons, then pour it into all those vessels and set aside the full ones." So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons. It's saying nothing about her going to neighbors and going all over town and gathering jars. It just says, so she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not another vessel." We have run out of vessels. We have reached capacity. There is no more room. And then what happened? So the oil ceased. The oil finished when she reached capacity. That's what it's talking about. I'll pour out a blessing until there is no more room to receive it. How much room have you got? So the question is, when did the blessing stop for this lady? God was pouring out a blessing, but at some point it stopped. The answer is when she reached capacity. You see, capacity is important. Where is our capacity? Once there was no more room to pour oil in, the oil stopped. If she had more pots and pans, would the oil have kept going? The answer is yes. So who determined, who made that decision of what the capacity was going to be? She made the decision. The prophet did not tell her exactly how many pots and pans and jars to gather, so she could have gathered millions and all would have been filled. But you see, she only gathered as much as she thought would be enough. Just like her, we all have a comfort point, a point that's which we think it is enough for me and my family. It's enough for me and my family, so I will settle here. Going back to walking in love, what we just talked, if we think about walking in love and thinking about our neighbors, if we really wanted to help others, we would be out there getting more jars. There's a lot of needy people, and we would be out there increasing our capacity. You see, even people that are called into ministry, there's a lot of people to help. So what do? They go and do a Bible college. They go and study. They increase their capacity to be able to help more people. And in this case, she set her own capacity. So reading the story, as I said, it doesn't mention if she actually went and asked all her neighbors for jars. It just says that she went and closed the door. So we don't know. We assume that she went and gathered jars. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Maybe she decided that she had enough jars of her own that if she filled all of them, would be enough to pay the debt and maybe have a little bit left to live on. So she decided, you know what? I'm happy with that. But what we know is that she set the limit. And so we need to look at ourselves and say, where am I setting the limit in my own life? But my point is that our capacity is the limiter for how much blessing we can contain. Now let's look at Peter again, because we looked at Peter in the previous episodes. So I'll round it up here pretty soon. But we looked at Peter and how he got a boat full of fish. Now, it says that it was so full that they were about to sink. You see, so it was full just on the brink. It was full to capacity. It was not just loads of fish. It doesn't say, oh, it got so much fish. There was a lot of fish. It says that it was so full that it was about to sink. So the Holy Spirit is trying to make the point that it was filled to its capacity. Now, Peter's boat in that case was his capacity to receive that blessing. If he had a bigger boat, then he would have caught more fish. But the boat that he had was the capacity that could be filled, that God could fill for him. So the amount of fish he caught was determined by the size of the boat, which in turn was determined by the capacity of that boat. Now, bringing it back to us again. So looking at us, we looked at a couple of examples. The question that I want us to ask ourselves is, what is my capacity? What is my capacity? We know that that lady could have increased the capacity. We can increase our capacity. Maybe I want a promotion at work, but can I contain it? These are the kind of questions that would stir us to maybe increase our capacity. If we're praying for something, do I have the capacity to contain what I'm praying for? Maybe I want to double my business this year, but can I contain that blessing? Maybe I want a business idea, but do I know anything about business? So, Lord, give me a business idea. Maybe I want to go into full-time ministry. Some people pray about that. You know, Lord, give me some international ministry or whatever, but can I handle that pressure? Do I have the capacity to step into that kind of blessing? We sometimes pray and ask for things that are beyond our capacity to contain it. So it won't work. But one thing we can do is to increase our capacity. If we are praying for a business idea, guess what? We can read some books on it, on how to start a business, how to administer a business, how to grow a business. If we want God to call us into full-time ministry, maybe we can go and do a Bible course, or maybe we can, do something online, do something to increase our capacity in order to then be considered for that blessing. If we want sometimes with people that work full-time, maybe we want a promotion. Well, how about we do some courses, like there are evening courses on management, managing a team or something. You increase your capacity and then God will fill it with his blessing. So the question I'm asking myself, not just us, but myself, is, if I'm saying, God, bless me with something, whatever, do I have the capacity to receive it? This is really the question for tonight, and I'm only looking at the physical side of things, because I knew that we wouldn't have time to look at the mental and the mindset, and we can look at it maybe next week. But this is really the question. Am I asking God to bless me, and then saying, God, you bless me, and then you do it as well? You see? So how does that work? Am I asking God to promote me and then do my job or do my responsibilities that are required of me in the new post? You see, because I don't have the capacity for it to be a manager, am I saying, God, you make me a manager and then you do the job for me? Because I don't have the capacity to manage. You see, sometimes that's how we pray. You see, Isaac was the promise. Isaac was the blessing that Abraham was praying and all of that. But Sarah had to carry him 9 months. Then she had to give birth to Isaac. She had to nurse him, to clean him, to feed him. And then Abraham had to protect, provide, and grow, teach him, and give him direction, all of that. We have a part to play, but it does depend on our capacity. So my encouragement for today is, let's work on our capacity in whatever direction that we pray God to bless us in, and then he will fill that capacity. So we've only looked at the physical side. Next week, we will start looking at the mental side, because that is another limiter that would limit us into receiving more from God. But this is it for today.